Hey guys, tonight we drift back into the soot-smudged streets of Victorian London, where the air is thick with coal smoke, damp brick, and the clatter of horses pulling carts over cobblestones. Gas lamps flicker in the mist, turning the fog into a pale gold haze. It's beautiful in its way, like a painting come to life, but don't let the romance fool you. You probably wouldn't survive a week here without either falling sick or finding yourself in serious need of a hot bath you'll never get. Hygiene as you know it simply isn't part of everyday life yet. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from tonight and what time it is where you are. I love picturing all of us scattered across the world, stepping into these time travel moments together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your walk in the early morning, when the first gray light is just brushing the rooftops. The streets are waking, the clip-clop of hooves, the creak of cartwheels, the faint shouts of traders preparing their stalls. The cobblestones glisten from last night's drizzle, or maybe from something less wholesome. Crossing sweepers, mostly young boys, are already at work with their brooms, clearing a path for the well-dressed to avoid stepping directly into the day's mixture of mud manure and kitchen slops. Shoes and hems are precious here. The streets are merciless. In the cramped back rooms of modest houses, the morning wash is underway. It's a far cry from your warm shower at home. A porcelain basin, no bigger than a dinner plate, sits on a wooden stand. A jug of cold water, fetched from a pump or a kitchen tap if you're lucky, is poured in sparingly. A rough bar of soap might be used, but water is the main tool. You splash your face and neck, perhaps rub your hands and arms. That's your morning clean. If you have tooth powder, a mixture of chalk, crushed brick, and maybe a hint of peppermint, you rub it on your teeth with a finger or a stiff brush. In wealthier homes, a maid will bring hot water in heavy jugs from the kitchen. She'll fill her mistress's basin, lay out fresh towels, and stand ready to tidy away the used water. But even in these grand houses, a full bath is rare. Perhaps once a week in summer, less in winter. Water must be heated by fire, carried upstairs, and emptied again by hand. Between baths, sponge downs are the norm, with scented soaps and perfumes masking whatever lingers. Outdoors, the city's smells are unavoidable. Horses are everywhere, and with them comes manure, tons of it every day. In dry weather, it turns to dust and drifts in the air. In wet weather, it mixes with mud into a slick paste that clings to boots and skirts. The gutters run with waste rainwater. Wash water refuse tipped from chamber pots. The drains lead to the Thames, which also supplies much of the city's drinking water. It's not a mystery why disease is common here. The real mystery is how anyone stays healthy at all. You wander toward one of the public pumps where a small line of people waits to fill buckets. The pump handle squeaks with each pull, the water spilling into pails and slopping over the cobblestones. It looks clear enough, but appearances mean little. Germ theory hasn't yet taken root. People believe disease comes from foul-smelling air miasmas, not from invisible microbes in the water. They might hold their breath near an open sewer, yet drink freely from a pump drawing water a stone's throw away from that same sewer's outflow. Toilets as you know them are uncommon. In working-class homes, a chamber pot under the bed is emptied each morning into a backyard privy or directly into the gutter in poorer districts. Night soil men collect waste from privies in barrels, carting it away to be dumped outside the city. It's a nighttime job, and you can smell their passing long before you see them. Laundry is another battle. Clothes are expensive and built to last, which means they're worn again and again before washing. Laundresses boil linens in copper tubs, scrub them against boards, and wring them out by hand. Underclothes are washed more often, but outer garments may go weeks between cleanings. Coal smoke and city grime cling to every thread, so even clean clothes carry the scent of the street. And yet there's an odd sort of order in the grime. The respectable make sure their doorsteps are scrubbed daily, their windows polished, their boots blacked. Maids sweep the front steps in the early morning, flicking dirt into the gutter, where it joins the city's tide of filth. Behind closed doors, however, things are not always as pristine. Rooms are dim and often damp, the air heavy with coal dust and the scent of last night's supper. Curtains and carpets go unwashed for months. Mattresses might never be cleaned. Bed bugs are an unspoken truth. In the markets, vendors are setting out goods. Fishmongers lay their catch on open boards, the smell already sharp in the morning chill. Butchers hang sides of beef in shop windows. Greengrocers stack vegetables into neat pyramids. None of it is covered. Flies are kept at bay only by the cool air and the constant fanning of cloths. Customers handle the produce freely. It's the best the system can offer. By mid-morning, the streets are fully alive. The mingled smells, coal smoke, horse manure, frying onions, damp wool, unwashed bodies, are as much a part of the city's character as its skyline. You learn to breathe it in without flinching. For the people who live here, it's simply the smell of home. And as you keep walking, you begin to understand. In Victorian London, hygiene isn't a matter of chasing total cleanliness. It's about keeping just far enough ahead of the dirt that life can go on. It's a constant negotiation between what you can change and what you simply have to live with. You turn another corner and the day unfolds. The little cafe you find is narrow. Its front windows fogged from the heat of the oven and the damp breath of early customers. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of yeast, strong tea, and damp wool. You shake off the mist from your coat, or if you're a Victorian Londoner, your heavy overcoat stiffened with years of wear and step onto creaking floorboards. The wooden counter is scrubbed daily, but the notion of disinfecting is unknown. The teacups are rinsed in hot water, sometimes with a splash of soda powder, but there's no guarantee of true cleanliness. Still, the warmth and the smell of fresh bread are enough to draw you in, enough to make you forget for a moment the grimy streets outside. Behind the counter, a woman in a faded dress pours steaming tea from a heavy pot into thick ceramic mugs. She doesn't wear gloves. Her fingers are chapped and raw from a lifetime of scrubbing. Her apron is stained from flour gravy and long hours. A pot of sugar sits nearby, its spoon resting in the granules. You notice several customers use the same spoon without a second thought, common practice. Germs are a foreign concept. People here fear visible dirt far more than unseen bacteria. A boy runs in with a tray of pies, steam rising from their cracked crusts. He's come straight from the bakehouse where flour hangs in the air, like morning mist, and settles in every corner. The baker's apron is white with dust, his hair and eyebrows powdered with it too. In such places, hygiene is a matter of tradition. Sweep the floor, wash the trays, wipe down the tables, but no one worries about the possibility that a rat might scurry over the shelves at night. In Victorian London, rats are as common as pigeons. The real art lies in keeping them just out of sight. You sit at a small wooden table, the varnish worn away in patches. The man beside you stirs his tea with a spoon, then casually lays it back on the table, leaving a damp ring. He wears a cravat tucked into a waistcoat, his collar faintly gray with use. In this world, clothing is an investment, not a disposable commodity. Even the middle class send shirts to the laundry only weekly, and collars and cuffs, detachable for easy washing, are scrubbed separately. Soap flakes are precious. Laundresses work themselves to exhaustion, boiling linens in great copper tubs, scrubbing them on washboards and wringing them dry by hand. Your crisp white shirt in the 21st century would be an unthinkable luxury here. Out on the street again, the day has taken hold. The narrow lanes are bustling costermongers shouting over their barrows, apprentices sweeping the shop fronts, milkmaids carrying pails balanced on yokes across their shoulders. A rag-and-bone man trundles past, calling for cast-off clothes, broken furniture, anything to be repaired or resold. Waste is valuable in a city where most own little. Even worn-out soap ends can be melted down and remolded. Down a side street, you come upon a public bathhouse. These places are a blessing for those without access to private bathing facilities, meaning the vast majority of city dwellers. Inside the tiled rooms are steamy, the air heavy with the smell of damp towels and soap. The water is heated in great boilers piped into a series of private cubicles or open pools. The bath attendant collects a small fee, provides you with a towel and a sliver of soap, and points you toward an available tub. Privacy varies. In poorer districts, you might share the space with several strangers. The water is often reused until it's too cloudy to bear making clean a relative term. Yet for many, a visit here is a treasured part of the week. The hot water eases aching muscles. The steam loosens the tightness in chests from the city's coal-smogged air. People linger chatting in low voices or simply soaking in the rare warmth. You imagine the feeling of sinking into the bath, the heat stealing into your bones, the faint rasp of soap against skin that hasn't felt such luxury since last week's visit. In a life of endless work and cold rooms, this is bliss. The streets around the bathhouse are lined with shops selling brushes, soaps, hair oils, and patent medicines. Through one dusty window, you see rows of sanitary toothbrushes, stiff bristles set into carved bone handles. In another, bottles of tooth tincture promise to preserve the gums and whiten the teeth. Many of these concoctions are more harmful than helpful, containing abrasives that strip enamel or acids that corrode it. But they are marketed with confidence, their labels adorned with flowing script and images of smiling ladies. Without regulation, truth is optional. You pass a barber's shop where a man is having his mustache waxed into neat points. The barber dips a comb into a jar of pomade, the same comb he's used on other clients today. The air smells of bay rum and the faint metallic tang of razors. In the corner, another man is having his boots polished until they gleam. Appearance matters in Victorian society, even if cleanliness is more about perception than science. A well-brushed coat and tidy hair can make you respectable, even if your last full bath was 10 days ago. As you walk, you can't help but notice the smells and orchestra of odors playing out in every street. There's the sweet, sharp reek of manure, the damp mildew of rain-soaked walls, the tang of coal smoke drifting from chimney pots. A fishmonger's stall adds its salty, briny note. A butcher's shop contributes the heavy, coppery scent of raw meat. Mixed into it all is the ever-present human smell, sweat soap, hair oil, and the faint whiff of unwashed wool. To modern noses, it's overpowering. To Victorians, it's simply the smell of life. In the poorer quarters, the smells intensify. Here, refuse piles up faster than the scavengers can cart it away. Narrow courts and alleys trap stagnant air. Gutters carry sluggish trickles of waste toward the nearest drain, which is little more than a hole in the street. Children play barefoot in the muck, their shouts echoing between grimy brick walls. Washing lines are strung overhead, fluttering with shirts and sheets stiff with cold. Women scrub steps and stoops with buckets of gray water, trying to keep at least the entrance clean if nothing else. Respectability starts at the doorstep. You stop to watch a water cart making its rounds. The driver, a burly man in a battered bowler hat, hauls buckets from the tank on his wagon to refill household barrels. For those without a private pump, this is the only way to get fresh water, though. Fresh is a term you'd use loosely here. In summer, the barrels grow slimy. In winter, the water freezes solid. But it's water, and that's what matters. People store it carefully, covering the barrels with cloth to keep out dust and pests. Still, it's impossible to keep it truly pure. Turning into a more prosperous street, you notice the difference immediately. The pavements are cleaner, the shop fronts brighter. Here, housemaids sweep steps daily, polish brass knockers until they shine and chase away any ragged sweepers who linger too long. Dustmen collect the refuse more regularly, and the gutters are less clogged. Even the air smells fresher, though that's more about the absence of overwhelming stenches than the presence of any real cleanliness. You pass a delivery boy wheeling a barrow piled with coal sacks. Coal dust clings to his face and hair, blackening the creases of his skin. His hands are raw from lifting heavy sacks all day, and his clothes are permanently dust-stained. In most homes, coal fires are the heart of daily life. They heat water, warm rooms, and cook meals. But they also fill the air with soot that settles on every surface. In the evenings, maids dust the furniture and sweep the hearth, but by morning the fine black powder is back again. You pause outside a chemist's shop, drawn by the scent of camphor and lavender. Inside shelves hold jars of powders and potions, some medicinal, others cosmetic. A glass case displays cakes of scented soap, violet rose sandalwood luxuries for those who can afford them. Most people make do with plain brown soap, harsh on the skin, but effective on stubborn grime. The chemist sells disinfectants, 2-carbolic acid chloride of lime, but these are used sparingly, mostly in hospitals or during outbreaks of disease. In the average home, the closest thing to a disinfectant is strong soap and elbow grease. Leaving the shop, you feel the damp air cling to your skin again. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolls the hour, its sound rolling over the rooftops. You glance toward the river, hidden behind warehouses and alleys, knowing it carries the city's waste away and brings disease back in return. Life in Victorian London moves on regardless, each day a careful dance around dirt, disease, and the unspoken understanding that complete cleanliness is impossible here. You keep walking deeper into the city's living history, where every brick and cobblestone seems steeped in the scent and texture of the 19th century. The narrow lane ahead dips gently toward the river. The air grows heavier, thicker with moisture, and you can feel it clinging to your coat and hair. The sound of the Thames comes to you in pieces, the hollow slap of water against stone, the creak of a moored barge shifting with the current, the faint calls of men working along the embankment. This close to the water, the smells sharpen, briny and damp, but laced with something sourer, the trace of refuse and waste that never quite leaves the river's breath. Warehouses line the quayside, their brickwork streaked with decades of soot and moisture. Great wooden doors stand open on iron hinges, revealing stacks of barrels, crates, and sacks. Teamsters and dockhands move in steady rhythm, unloading goods from the barges. Horses wait patiently nearby, steam puffing from their nostrils, their coats glistening faintly under the gray light. The cobbles here are slick, the grooves between stones filled with a permanent black slurry of mud, ash, and who knows what. At the base of a worn flight of steps leading down to the river, you spot a small knot of figures bent low over the exposed mud. These are the mudlarks, men, women, and even children picking through the riverbed for anything of value. A scrap of coal, a fragment of rope, a dropped coin, all can be traded for a few pennies. They work in tattered coats, their boots thick with river muck, bare hands digging through silt. Hygiene for them is a luxury far beyond reach. At day's end, they may rinse their finds in the same river they've been wading through. You move away from the water along a narrow alley. The damp air is trapped between the tall buildings, warm and stale, in a way that makes you instinctively breathe shallower. Here the gutters run with sluggish trickles of gray water, winding around piles of rubbish left for the night soil men or rag pickers. In one open gap between houses, you glimpse a public privy, just a crude wooden shed over a pit. The door hangs ajar, and the smell carries well beyond the threshold. A scattering of lime powder dulls the worst of it, but only just. Past the privy, you meet a man carrying a wooden yoke across his shoulders, 2 heavy buckets of water swinging at either end. He's headed for a row of houses where families will pay a penny or two for delivery. In homes without a pump or barrel, this is the only way to get water at all. The buckets sway dangerously with each step, the sloshing contents catching the faint light. It looks clean enough, but in truth it is the same water that may have passed near open drains or seeped through cracked pipes. In the yard of one of these houses, a small group of women kneels by a pair of wash tubs. Their sleeves are rolled high skirts tucked up around their waists. They scrub shirts and underclothes against ridged boards, the soap turning the water cloudy in moments. Steam curls up from a nearby copper where more water is being heated. The air smells faintly of lye, strong enough to sting the nose. When the washing is done, the women will wring the garments out by hand, peg them to lines strung across the yard, and wait for the damp to lift a slow process in this cold, heavy air. In one shadowed corner of the yard, an older man sits on a low stool, stropping a straight razor along a leather strap. A basin of cold water rests at his feet, a brush floating in it. It's his shaving water drawn fresh that morning, now gone tepid. He works without hurry, pausing to dip the brush and work up a thin lather. The smell of cheap soap drifts faintly to you, blending with the sharper tang of coal smoke from the kitchen chimney. Stepping back onto the street, you pass a fish seller's cart. The fish are laid out on damp cloths over boards, their silver skins catching the dull daylight. The seller's apron is wet to the knees, his hands reddened from the cold. He wraps your purchase in paper torn from yesterday's news, handing it over without a word. The briny smell clings to your fingers until you rub them on your coat. A little further along, a barber's shop stands open. Inside, a man sits in the chair while the barber scrapes his chin with a long, gleaming blade. The towel tucked around his neck has been used before today, perhaps several times. Between customers, the razor is rinsed in a small basin that grows murkier as the hours pass. Hair clippings scatter across the tiled floor, swept into loose piles only now and then. The air is thick with bay rum tobacco and the faint musk of wool coats. Turning a corner, you enter a busier street lined with shops. Here, a baker stands in his doorway, dusting flour from his apron. Behind him, the warm smell of fresh bread drifts out, cutting briefly through the heavier odors of the street. The shelves are stacked with loaves, their crusts glossy from the oven. The baker's work surfaces are swept clean each day, but not scrubbed in the modern sense. Bits of dough and flour are part of the shop's landscape, as inevitable as the brick walls. Opposite, a seamstress sits in a window, her head bent over her work. The table before her is scattered with fabric scraps, pins, and a chipped mug of tea. She wears a neat, if slightly shiny, dress. Her hair is pulled into a tidy knot. She glances up briefly as you pass, then returns to stitching. The window glass between you is streaked from last week's rain. As the street bends, the smell changes. You catch the sweeter, heavier scent of a public house beer wood smoke and damp wool coats drying by the fire. The door swings open, and a burst of warmth spills into the cold air, along with laughter and the clink of mugs. Inside, men crowd around the counter, their tankards rinsed in a single basin behind the bar. The floor is sticky underfoot, the air hazy with smoke from pipes and the fireplace alike. Outside again, you find yourself walking past a line of narrow courts leading off the main road. In each, the cobbles are dark with moisture, the air still and close. Doorsteps are scrubbed here, but the walls are streaked with soot, and washing lines sag under the weight of damp clothes. In one doorway, a mother combs her child's hair, with deliberate practiced strokes, peering closely for lice. A small tin of ointment rests beside her, ready for when she finds what she's looking for. You step carefully around a puddle edged with straw and coal dust. The puddles here are not just rainwater. They carry the leavings of the day ash refused the runoff from kitchens. The smell rises in a soft wave as your boot splashes through. By the time you reach the next crossing, the noise of the river is behind you again, but its presence lingers in the damp air, in the way the streets seem to slope inevitably toward it. Life here always bends back toward the Thames, for better or worse. And as you walk on, you carry with you the mingled scents and textures of everything you've seen: the soap-frothed washtubs, the barber's basins, the sweet yeast of the bakery, the tang of fish and coal smoke. It's the smell of a city always half-washed, always half-waiting to be washed again. And so the day unfolds, pulling you deeper into the heart of Victorian London's uneasy relationship with dirt and cleanliness. The street you've followed bends gently into a wider thoroughfare where the city's daily pulse beats louder. Omnibuses lumber past their wheels, splashing through shallow puddles, the upper decks crowded with passengers muffled in scarves and shawls. A hansom cab rattles by its driver, hunched forward against the cold, the horse's breath steaming in the air. Boots strike the cobblestones in steady rhythms, mixing with the faint clang of distant church bells. Even in this broader, busier space, the air carries that familiar mix of coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint sourness of yesterday's refuse lingering in gutters. On one corner, a tobacconist's shop spills a warm, aromatic haze into the street. The shopkeeper stands in the doorway, pipe clenched between his teeth, the sweet, sharp scent of tobacco curling around him. Inside, wooden drawers hold dark shreds and golden flakes of leaf, each variety boasting its own character. The polished counter gleams faintly, but the air is dense with smoke that settles into everything: clothes, curtains, even the shopkeeper's beard. No thought is given to airing out the room. The smell is part of the place's identity. A few doors down, a small stall offers lavender water, hair pomade, and scented soaps. The woman behind it holds up a square of fabric sprinkled with lavender water for a customer to sniff. The fragrance is sharp, bright, and fleeting, a small shield against the city's heavier odors. In an age without deodorant, these perfumes are not mere indulgence. They are armor for the senses, a way to face the press of humanity in the streets without flinching. Further along stands a gleaming sanitary goods shop, its window filled with enameled wash basins, polished chamber pots, and bright copper kettles. A hand-painted sign in the glass extols the wonders of the modern flushing water closet, complete with brass fittings. Inside, a salesman demonstrates the noisy flush to a small cluster of curious customers. Their murmurs are approving, but for most such a luxury is far beyond reach. The poorer streets rely on shared privies or chamber pots emptied at dawn, the work of the night soil men whose passing is marked by an unmistakable stench. You pass into a narrow, green-edged park, a rare pocket of open space. The gravel paths are slick with damp, bordered by bare winter trees. On a bench, an elderly man scatters crumbs for a brace of pigeons. Their cooing fills the air, mingling with the rustle of the gardener's rake as he gathers wet leaves into a wheelbarrow. The smell here is lighter wet earth and fallen leaves, though the ever-present coal haze hangs faintly, even under the open sky. At one corner of the park stands a public drinking fountain, a tall cast-iron column with a narrow spout trickling into a basin. A tin mug hangs from a chain, swinging gently in the breeze. The water sparkles in the dim light, but you know better than to trust its purity. Still, to the Londoner of the day, this is a welcome sight. Passers-by cup their hands to drink or take a quick swig from the communal mug, wiping their mouths on their sleeves before moving on. Leaving the park, you find yourself in a street lined with terraced houses. In the better-kept homes, brass knockers shine on freshly scrubbed doors, and the stone steps have been swept of the day's dirt. In the poorer ones, paint flakes from window frames. The steps are worn smooth by years of footfall, and the curtains hang limp in the damp air. Behind each door lies a different story of hygiene. In some, a housemaid carries fresh water upstairs each morning. In others, a family shares a single wash basin in the kitchen. Through one open doorway, you glimpse a scullery where a young woman scrubs dishes in a deep stone sink. Steam curls up from the kettle on the range, its warmth fighting the winter air. The floor is damp, scattered with vegetable peelings, and the soap has left a thin slick on the surface of the water. She works quickly, her hands reddened by the cold and the lye in the soap. When the dishes are done, she will turn to scrubbing the table and sweeping the floor, her day a constant loop of cleaning tasks that never quite conquer the dirt. Around the corner, a line of school children marches 2 by 2 toward a brick schoolhouse. Their boots are polished for the morning, their collars straightened, but the knees of their trousers are shiny with wear. Schools make some attempt at hygiene basins for washing hands, a sliver of soap on a string, but colds, coughs, and worse pass easily between desks. Teachers open windows for fresh air, when weather allows, trusting in the prevailing belief that a good draft can drive out illness. Following them leads you to the market street. Stalls stand in neat rows under canvas awnings, their counters crowded with goods. The fishmonger's block gleams with dampness, the day's catch laid out whole heads and tails intact. The butcher's hooks display sides of meat red and glistening in the cold. The greengrocer arranges heaps of carrots, cabbages, and onions, their skins still carrying a trace of the soil they grew in. Flies are fewer in winter, but in warmer months they are a constant battle shooed with rags or hands in between serving customers. At the far end of the market, a second-hand clothes seller shakes out a heavy overcoat, sending a puff of dust into the air. The coat is worn, but sound it seems checked carefully by a potential buyer. In a city where new fabric is costly, mending and re-wearing are a way of life. Washing is saved for when it's truly needed. Too much scrubbing wears clothes out faster than the dirt ever will. Near the edge of the market, a street preacher has claimed a soapbox. His voice rises above the din as he warns of moral decay, urging the crowd to keep both their souls and their bodies clean. In Victorian thought, cleanliness and morality are tightly bound, tidy dress, and a washed face signal virtue. Dirt and disorder hint at moral failing. Passers-by listen for a moment before moving on their baskets, heavy with the day's purchases. By midday, the streets hum with urgency. Workers on break spill into pie shops and tea rooms. The smell of baking bread drifts from open doors, mingling with the sharper tang of greengrocers' stalls and the damp metallic note of the fishmonger's wares. A dust cart trundles by men in leather gloves, heaving bins and sacks into its bed. The cart will head for the outskirts where the city's refuse smolders slowly, in great heaps, adding its smoke to the already laden air. Turning down a side street, you pass a row of modest homes where laundry hangs high on lines strung between windows. Shirts, skirts, and underthings sway in the damp breeze, their edges darkened from drying too close to the coal fire. Below, a woman tips a bucket of gray water into the gutter, the stream winding away toward the nearest drain. Respectability here is measured in small gestures, a swept stoop, a clean-looking line of washing boots brushed free of the worst of the mud. As you move on, the lamplighter's tall figure appears at the far end of the road, his long pole tipped with a flame. He moves from lamp to lamp, coaxing each into its evening glow. Soon the daylight will fade, and the fog will thicken once more, softening the city's edges until the lamps themselves seem to float. And as you follow the road, you feel the city shifting, day sliding toward night, the cycle of work and washing grime and order, ready to begin again in its quiet, unending rhythm. The air cools as the sun lowers the light, settling into that silvery half-glow the city wears before night. The lamplighter you saw earlier has already made progress. Pools of gaslight stretch along the street like stepping stones, each halo shimmering faintly in the mist. You pass under one feeling, the faint hiss of its flame above your head. At the corner, a chandler's shop draws your eye. The window is crowded with candles, tall, thin tapers, stout, practical pillars, thick beeswax cylinders glowing faintly in the lamplight. Inside, the smell is unmistakable warm tallow mixed with the faint sweetness of wax. The chandler's apron is stiff with dried drips, his fingernails edged in gray from days spent handling wicks and wax. Cleanliness here is about keeping pests away from the stock, not scrubbing surfaces spotless. Next door, an open window reveals a seamstress at work. She leans over her table, her shoulders curved inward, her hands moving quickly over a garment spread before her. The cloth is pale against the darkened wood, and pins glint faintly in the dim light. A chipped teacup sits at the edge of her work, the dregs cooling slowly. She'll drink from it again before washing. It's not wasteful. It's practical. Hauling water up narrow stairs for such small tasks isn't worth the effort. Further on, the street narrows and slips into a small courtyard, where a pump stands, its handle gleaming from decades of hands. Two women are filling their pails, chatting in low voices. Their skirts are damp at the hem from the puddle forming beneath the pump. They work without hurry, each swing of the handle smooth from long practice. The water splashes into the pails cold and quick, sending small rivulets running between the cobbles toward the gutter. Leaving the courtyard, you find yourself among small shops, cobblers, tinkers, herbalists. The herbalist's door is propped open, bunches of dried rosemary, sage, and lavender hanging from the lintel. The air inside is green and fragrant. She measures out dried chamomile blossoms into a paper twist, explaining their calming properties. In a city where real medical care is scarce and costly, such remedies are part of daily hygiene. A sprig of rosemary tucked in a coat, a handful of lavender in a linen drawer. These are thought to keep both scent and sickness at bay. The next doorway belongs to a public house. You step inside to the smell of beer, wood smoke, and damp wool. The floor is dark from years of spills only loosely swept clean between patrons. Tankards line the bar, rinsed in a shared basin that has seen many mugs already today. At one table, men finish their bowls of eel pie, wiping their mouths with the backs of their hands. Soap waits until Saturday night. Work waits for no man's bath. Back outside, you pass a line of costermongers selling apples from wooden crates. The fruit is bruised and irregular, its skin dull under the lamplight. A young boy bites into one without a second thought, juice running down his chin. No one minds. In this age, fresh fruit straight from the crate is considered clean enough. You pause at a shoeblack's stand. The boy working there can't be more than 12 yet. His hands move with quick confidence, the brushes flashing in the lamplight. He buffs your boots until they gleam, folding his cloth to find a clean patch for the final pass. His rag is already black with polish from a dozen other boots today, but he treats it as if it's as fresh as morning. A penny changes hands, and you step away, boots smartened for the next stretch of street. As you walk, the smells of the city shift again. Here, a fish stall still clings to the day's briny scent. There, a butcher's shop releases a faint metallic tang. Somewhere close, a baker is finishing his evening's work, the warm scent of bread pushing back against the damp. Above it all, the bass note of the city's constant grime hums on coal smoke, damp wool, unwashed stone. You duck into a back alley where a rhythmic thud catches your attention. A woman stands with a rug draped over a wooden frame, beating it with a wicker paddle. Each strike sends a puff of dust into the air, illuminated briefly in the lamplight. It's a thankless task. Tomorrow the dust will be back, but for now the rug will be a little cleaner. She coughs once into her sleeve, then continues, arms swinging steadily. The alley opens near a laundry yard. Here the air is heavy with the scent of hot soap and wet fabric. Women work in pairs, scrubbing shirts against washboards, lifting them into steaming tubs, wringing them out with hard-practiced twists. Their arms are red from heat, and lie their aprons soaked through. Above them, rows of wet sheets sway slightly, dripping steadily onto the packed earth below. Their work is relentless, but in these white flapping rows, you see one of the few visible victories against the city's constant dirt. By now, the light has thinned to the deep blue-gray of evening. The lamplighter's glow moves steadily down the next street, each flame catching in the mist. Behind you, the laundry yard fades into shadow, the slap of wet cloth and the murmur of women's voices growing faint. You pause under a lamp, taking in the quiet shift of the street as night settles fully. The shopkeepers will soon shutter their windows. Doorsteps will get a final sweep. Basins will be filled for the nightly wash, and boots will be set by the fire to dry. In hundreds of houses, small rituals of cleanliness will repeat themselves, hands and faces rinsed, water emptied into gutters, chamber pots readied for the night. And so the city makes its quiet pivot into darkness, preparing to sleep under the same mist that has wrapped its streets since morning. The grime will not be gone by dawn, but the people will have made their stand against it, as they do every day, one scrubbed stoop, one washed face, one beaten rug at a time. Evening deepens, and the mist seems to thicken around every corner. Gas lamps glow like suspended moons, their halos caught in the drifting fog. The chatter of the day fades, replaced by the lower hum of night work, beginning cartwheels over cobbles, the clang of a distant gate closing boots scuffing as shopkeepers make their final rounds. You wander down a narrow lane where light spills in warm rectangles from the upper floor windows. In one, you glimpse a maid carrying a steaming jug of water, her skirt swishing against the stairs as she climbs. She disappears into a bedroom where her mistress will soon take her evening sponge down face, neck, hands, perhaps feet if the water is plentiful. Towels will be warmed by the fire perfume dabbed on wrists and behind the ears. It is a ritual of refinement, but still a far cry from the modern nightly shower. A few doors along another household tends to the same business in a humbler way. A tin bath has been dragged into the kitchen, set near the range for warmth. The first kettle of hot water is poured in steam curling upward. A man lowers himself into the shallow pool, with a sigh, scrubbing quickly before the water cools. He will finish towel off, and the next bather will take his place wife, then children, then perhaps the last rinse for the youngest. By the end, the water will be tepid and cloudy, but no drop will be wasted. You step back into the street just as a man passes carrying a large bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He's a laundry collector making his evening rounds. Inside are linens and shirts from households wealthy enough to outsource their wash. The bundle smells faintly of damp soap and starch. It will be hauled to a wash house, boiled, scrubbed, and pressed before being returned clean, if a little grayed from hard use. Following the smell of hot bread, you find yourself at the back entrance of a bakery. Through the open door, you see the baker brushing flour from a wooden table, the air heavy with the mingled scents of yeast and coal smoke. Loaves cool in neat rows, their crusts cracked and glistening. Flour dusts the baker's hair, his eyebrows, even the creases of his skin. In this place, hygiene is measured in rhythm sweep. The floor scrape the boards, keep the mice out. Perfection is impossible, so the aim is simply to keep the work moving and the bread wholesome. Down the next lane, a tavern door stands open, spilling warmth and the scent of beer into the cool night air. Inside, men lean over mugs, their voices low and steady. The barmaid dips each mug in a shared basin before refilling it from the tap. The floor, dark with years of spills, carries a faint stickiness underfoot. The smell is a mixture of malt, damp wool, and the faintest trace of pipe smoke. Outside again, you hear the rumble of a covered wagon approaching. It's the night soil cart, its wooden wheels rolling slow and heavy over the stones. The driver sits hunched in his coat face shadowed beneath his hat. Behind him, the barrels sway gently, their contents best left undescribed. The smell arrives before the cart does a blunt, sour wave that makes you instinctively step aside. The driver tips his hat as he passes, then disappears into the fog. Past the wagon, you notice a faint glow in a long-windowed building. This is a public washhouse, still busy even at this hour. Inside, rows of women bend over stone sinks, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Steam rises in slow clouds, the air warm and damp. Children sit on benches waiting for their mothers to finish. Bundles of wet laundry rest in wicker baskets ready to be hauled home. Here, cleanliness is communal, shared space, shared water, shared labor. It is as much about solidarity as sanitation. As you turn toward a quieter street, a crossing sweeper works his broom in slow arcs, clearing a path across the slick cobbles. The bristles are frayed, the handle smoothed by years of work. He nods as you pass, leaning briefly on his broom before resuming. His job is simple, but it keeps the crossings passable for those who can afford to toss him a coin. You pass a row of small shops with their shutters already drawn. In one, you can just make out the silhouette of a cobbler bent over his workbench, a single lamp burning beside him. Leather scraps litter the floor. Tools are lined neatly within reach. His apron is dark with polish, his fingers blackened from the day's work. The smell of leather and beeswax drifts faintly through the crack under the door. A little further on, you find a stable yard where grooms are bedding down the horses for the night. The sweet, sharp scent of hay mingles with the musk of the animals. Hooves shift softly on the straw tack jingles as it's hung up for the night. A boy carries a bucket of water, splashing some on his boots, but he doesn't stop to wipe them. The straw will cover it by morning. Here, the work of cleanliness belongs more to the animals than the humans tending them. The street turns again, narrowing as it approaches the river. The fog thickens, and with it comes that familiar edge of brine and silt. You can just make out the dark hulk of a barge moored against the embankment, its lantern rocking gently. The water below laps steadily against stone, carrying the city's unseen cargo downstream. In the stillness, the river seems almost clean, but you know its truth. As you move away, the night closes in a little more. The lamps stand like guardians at intervals, each one holding back a small circle of safety from the darkness. Between them, the city is a quieter, softer thing. Behind shutters and curtains, the final domestic tasks are being done: fires banked, ashes swept, basins emptied. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, drawing water, heating kettles, washing faces, scrubbing steps. And you keep walking, carrying the weight of the city's endless negotiations with dirt, the effort to stay ahead of it, the resignation when it seeps back in, and the quiet pride in every small victory won against it. The lamps along this street burn steadily, their mantles glowing within glass casings, beaded faintly with condensation. The fog curls upward in slow coils, making the pools of light seem like small, warm islands in a gray sea. Between them, shadow lies thick and cool, the stones beneath your feet slick enough to make you watch your step. You pass the narrow opening of a mews, and curiosity draws you in. It's quieter here, a little world tucked behind the grander front streets. The smell of hay greets you, mingled with the soft rustle of horses shifting in their stalls. Stable boys move about with practiced ease, pitchforks in hand, piling fresh straw into the stalls. The air is warmer in here, a relief from the damp chill outside. Water buckets are being topped up, hooves checked for stones, harnesses hung neatly on hooks along the wall. Hygiene here is measured in the health of the animals, clean straw, fresh water, and brushed coats. The boys' own clothes are dusted with chaff, their hands rough and faintly sweet-smelling from the hay. Stepping back onto the street, you see a lamplighter's ladder propped against a post. He's trimming the wick and adjusting the flame with the calm rhythm of long practice. The faint tang of burning oil drifts on the air. He closes the glass with a small click, hoists his ladder, and moves on into the fog, his silhouette swallowed almost immediately. You pass a row of small shops, most shuttered now. One window still glows the barber's. Inside, a man in shirt sleeves is tidying his counter, laying combs in a neat row, brushing stray hair clippings into a dustpan. The striped pole outside turns lazily in the still night air. He rinses his razor in a shallow basin, the water cloudy from the day's use, then hangs it to dry. In the lamplight, his white shirt looks faintly gray. Coal smoke stains cling stubbornly to fabric in this city. On the corner, a coffee stall is still in business. A small crowd of night workers huddles near the brazier, hands wrapped around thick mugs. The stallholder ladles coffee from a large enamel urn, its sides dulled by years of heat. The mugs are chipped, but warm in the hands rinsed between uses in a tin pail of cooling water. Steam rises into the night as the men drink in companionable silence. Following the glow of another lamp, you wander toward a row of narrow courts. In one, a single pump stands in the center, its handle gleaming from constant use. Tonight, it is quiet, but you can imagine the morning crowd skirts brushing damp stones, pails clanking children, darting between legs to fill their cups. A few small basins rest upside down on nearby steps, ready for the next day's washing. In the court's far corner, a doorway is open just wide enough to see a family gathered at a kitchen table. The father rinses his hands in a basin, the water gray from the day's work. A girl of 8 wipes the table with a cloth that's been rinsed and wrung out more times than you can count. The fire burns low, casting the room in a copper-gold glow. The air smells faintly of bread crusts and coal dust. Back on the main road, a sweeps boy emerges from a narrow side street, his face smudged black, his hair dusted with soot. He coughs into his sleeve, a dry, rasping sound. His tools clink as he walks a bundle of rods and brushes strapped across his back. He nods in greeting before disappearing into the fog. Baths are rare for boys like him. The soot will cling to his skin for days. You turn toward a row of small workshops. The cobbler's is still lit, the craftsman bent over a half-repaired boot. Leather scraps litter the floor, and the smell of polish hangs thick in the air. His tools rest in tidy order, though each is stained and darkened from use. Here, cleanliness is a matter of care for the craft, not for the hands that hold the tools. Past the workshops, the street narrows again. Washing lines crisscross overhead, some bearing shirts that sway gently in the night air. Drops fall from the cloth to the cobbles below, where they mingle with the dark trickles running toward the gutter. The lines hang high-strung between upper windows, where the damp will cling to the fabric for hours yet. A faint melody drifts toward you, thin, reedy, yet somehow comforting. You follow it to find an organ grinder turning the handle of his barrel organ, the tune winding out into the mist. A few children watch, clutching their shawls tighter against the chill. Their cheeks are flushed, their noses running, but their eyes are bright with delight. In the quiet of night, the music feels almost private, as though it belongs just to the handful who hear it. When the organ grinder moves on, the street falls quiet again. You take a side turning, and find yourself by the river once more. The embankment glistens faintly under the lamps, the wet stone catching the light in slick patches. The smell is familiar now, brine, damp wood, and the sour undertone of waste. Water laps steadily against the wall, the rhythm slow and deliberate. A lone lighterman tends his moorings, checking ropes, tapping the deck with his boot. His coat is stiff with salt, and damp his hands red from the cold. The fog off the river wraps around you as you head back toward the heart of the city. You pass a rag-and-bone man pushing his cart, its contents a jumbled silhouette, broken chairs, old iron-tattered fabric. His coat is patched, his boots worn, but his eyes are sharp in the lamplight. What he gathers tonight will be picked clean of anything useful the rest sold on or broken down. The hour grows later, the streets emptier. Lamps stand sentinel over shuttered shop fronts and closed doors. You hear only your own footsteps, now the faint hiss of the gas lamps, and the far-off sound of a carriage making its way across the stones. Behind those closed doors, the city tends to its final cleansings of the day, buckets emptied, hearths, swept boots lined neatly for the morning. And as you walk, you begin to feel the rhythm of it all, the daily loop of grime and order, washing and wearing, cleaning and enduring. It is never finished, but it never stops. In that constancy lies the very heartbeat of Victorian life. The fog hangs low over the rooftops, now draping the streets in a gray-white veil that softens every outline. Gas lamps burn as though suspended in air, their glow swallowed just beyond arm's reach. Your boots make a muted clap on the damp cobblestones, and the sound seems to linger behind you. You pass a shuttered bakery where a faint glow seeps through the cracks in the boards. Inside, the baker is already working for tomorrow, rolling dough on a long wooden table, his sleeves pushed up, his hands dusted with flour. The air inside is warm and heavy with yeast, but outside it cools quickly, taking the smell with it. The flour will cling to his hair and clothes, no matter how many times he brushes them down. For him, that dust is part of his trade just as much as his tools. Further along, you come to a small row of shop fronts, one of which still shows signs of life. It's a chandler's workshop, and in the dim light, you can make out the racks where fresh candles hang to set. The scent of warm tallow drifts out thick, fatty, faintly sweet. The floor is flecked with hardened drips. The workbench bears the permanent sheen of wax rubbed deep into the wood. The man within glances up briefly as he trims another wick, then bends again to his work. His apron is stiff from weeks of splatters, his fingers darkened at the tips. At the corner stands a public washhouse, its windows steamed and glowing. Inside, women bend over wide stone sinks, sleeves rolled high, hands plunged into hot, soapy water. Steam curls up in slow wreaths toward the rafters. Children doze on benches against the wall, their cheeks flushed from the heat. The smell here is thick soap flakes, damp wool, and the faint mineral tang of hot water from the boiler. A bath in such a place is never truly private, nor is the water entirely fresh, but the warmth alone makes it precious. Leaving the washhouse, you hear the slow creak of a barrow being pushed along the street. A man in a patched coat calls out softly, offering baked potatoes from the small brazier set into his cart. The skins split under the heat, releasing curls of steam. He serves them in twists of paper, the warmth of the potato soaking through into your hands. The paper is recycled from yesterday's news, the ink leaving faint smudges on your fingertips. Past the potato cellar, you find a row of narrow dwellings huddled together, their doors opening directly onto the street. In one, a family sits around a small fire, the door left ajar for the heat to escape. A woman kneels by a basin on the floor, sponging her youngest child's face and hands. The child squirms, half laughing, half protesting. The water in the basin is already cloudy, but it will be used until the washing is done. Here, waste is a luxury few can afford. A little further on, you turn down a passage where laundry hangs high overhead lines, strung from one upper window to another. The shirts and skirts sway gently, their damp hems dripping onto the cobbles below. In some places, drops fall into shallow puddles left by the day's rain. In others, they splash onto dark, slow-moving trickles, making their way to the gutter. The faint scent of soap mingles with the sharper smell of coal smoke drifting from chimneys. You emerge onto a street that slopes toward the river. The smell of brine and damp wood grows stronger, the fog thicker. A lighter man tends his moorings, the ropes creaking softly as he hauls them taut. His coat glistens faintly with moisture. His hands are red and raw from the cold. Around his feet, the deck is slick with a thin film of water and grit washed down from the quayside. Along the embankment, you find a knot of figures crouched low over baskets. These are the rag pickers sorting through the day's leavings for anything of value, scraps of cloth to sell to paper makers, bits of metal to a smith, fragments of rope to a sailmaker. Their fingers work quickly despite the cold moving from one basket to the next. The smell here is sharp and layered damp wool, fish mud, and the faint sourness of spoiled food. Leaving them behind, you turn into a street lined with small workshops. A cooper is still at work, the hollow thud of his mallet carrying into the street. His apron is marked with black pitch, his hands chafed from working staves into place. Sawdust lies thick along the doorway. The smell of resin hangs in the air, oddly clean amid the city's heavier scents. At the far end of the street, a barber's pole turns lazily in the night breeze. Inside, a single customer sits in the chair, head tilted back, as the barber wields his straight razor. A basin of gray water rests on the counter. The razor is dipped into it between strokes. The towel at the customer's neck has seen other faces today. The air is warm, tinged with bay rum and faint tobacco. Beyond the barber's, a corner shop keeps its door open to the street. Shelves are lined with jars of penny sweets, boxes of biscuits, and stacks of tea tins. A large tin scoop rests in a bin of sugar, its handle dulled by hundreds of hands. A boy leaves with a twist of boiled sweets in his pocket, his boots slapping on the stones as he runs. The hour is late now, and the streets have emptied further. You pass a solitary street sweeper, his broom whisking steadily over the stones. The bristles scrape at the grit, pushing it toward the gutter, where a sluggish stream of dirty water carries it away. He works without looking up, his rhythm as much a part of the city as the hiss of the gas lamps. Somewhere ahead, a church bell tolls softly, the sound rolling over the rooftops. Behind closed doors, homes are settling into the quiet of night. Fires are banked low lamps, turned down basins emptied into gutters. In parlors and kitchens, boots rest by the hearth, drying for the day to come. Laundry hangs by the stove to finish its drying overnight. The city seems to exhale here, its constant movement slowing but never stopping. Tomorrow will bring the same rituals, water fetched and boiled, hands washed, floors swept, steps, scrubbed linen, beaten or hung to air. Cleanliness in Victorian London is never a final state, only a temporary reprieve always borrowed from the next day's work. And as you walk on into the fog, you carry with you the knowledge that the city will meet the morning in much the same state you've found it tonight, scrubbed where it can be patched where it must be, and enduring where it has no choice. The fog drapes low across the street, now muting the glow of the gas lamps, so each appears like a blurred coin pressed into gray velvet. Your boots make a hollow tap on the cobbles, the sound carrying a little farther in the stillness of this late hour. The air tastes of damp stone and coal smoke, and the chill has settled deep enough that you can feel it in your knuckles. You turn into a lane that tilts slightly downhill. The buildings huddle closer together here, their upper stories leaning in as though conspiring. Windows are shuttered tight, though a few leak thin slits of lamplight into the mist. At one step, a tin basin has been left out overnight to catch rainwater. A faint skin has already formed on its surface, a thin film of soot and dust from the air. In the morning it might be used for a quick wash or to top up a kettle. Nobody will think twice about it. A shallow gutter runs along the lane's center, carrying a slow trickle of water toward the nearest drain. It gleams faintly under the lamps, winding past stray straw bits of coal and scraps of paper gone pulpy in the damp. This is the city's quiet bloodstream, moving waste away inch by inch. When the rain comes hard, it will flood these channels in a sudden rush. Until then, it works in silence. A side passage opens to a cramped courtyard shared by several houses. In the middle stands a pump, its handle shining where thousands of hands have worn it smooth. Tonight it's deserted, but you can picture the morning crush skirts brushing together pails, clanking children darting between legs to sip from cupped palms. The same water will be used for drinking, cooking, scrubbing floors, and filling basins for the morning wash. Its journey from pump to drain is short, and in between it will touch every corner of daily life. From one doorway drifts the sound of low conversation. You glance in to see a family crowded around a small fire. The father rinses his hands in a basin, the water already gray with the day's dirt. A girl no older than 10 is brushing her hair with slow, careful strokes, her mother holding a lantern so she can see. The floor is swept clean, the table wiped down with a damp cloth. In these small spaces, evening tidying is as much about making the place feel ordered as it is about actual cleanliness. Back on the lane, you pass a shop where the shutters are only half drawn. Inside, a cooper's apprentice is sweeping sawdust into a pile, the broom's rasp loud in the quiet. The air smells of wood shavings and resin, a rare sweetness in the city's heavy palette of scents. He tips the pile into a sack. Nothing here is wasted if it can be burned or reused. A little farther on, a faint metallic clank draws you toward a farrier's workshop. The forge is banked low for the night, but the heat still radiates faintly from the bricks. Tools hang neatly on the walls, their handles worn smooth from years of use. The floor is scattered with iron filings, and the smell of hot metal lingers like a ghost. Tomorrow morning, the sound of hammer on anvil will carry down the street again. You follow the lane to where it meets the river. The fog thickens here, wrapping the embankment in a muffled quiet. The water below moves with slow authority, its surface catching the occasional glint from a moored barge's lantern. You lean on the cold stone wall, breathing in the smell of brine-wet rope and something sourer beneath it all. Somewhere out there, a lighterman is checking his lines. You can hear the creak of rope and the muffled thump of wood against stone. Turning away from the river, you take a narrow alley, that leads back toward the busier streets. Here the cobbles are softer underfoot, padded with a layer of damp straw. The air is close, almost humid, with the mingled scents of cooking unwashed clothes and coal tar. Laundry lines crisscross overhead, dripping steadily into the passage. One doorway stands open to reveal a tin bath set squarely in the middle of a kitchen floor. A young boy is standing in it, shivering slightly, as his mother pours a jug of warm water over his shoulders. The water runs down to his ankles before pooling in the base, cloudy from soap. The jug is refilled from a kettle on the range, the process repeated, until the boy is clean, or as clean as can be, in a single basin of shared water. By the time his younger sister takes her turn, it will be tepid and faintly gray. Farther along, a woman leans out of an upper window to shake crumbs from a cloth. They flutter down into the alley, joining the mix, already underfoot. She calls briefly to a neighbor across the way, their voices echoing softly before both disappear inside. You emerge into a slightly wider street where a coffee stall still burns its lamp. The stallholder ladles steaming liquid into thick mugs, the smell strong enough to cut through the night air. Customers stand close to the brazier, letting the heat seep into their hands. The mugs are rinsed between uses in a bucket of water that's been cloudy for some time, but nobody minds. Warmth is worth far more than perfect hygiene. On the corner, a bootblack sits hunched on his stool, polishing a customer's shoes in the lamplight. His brushes work quickly, raising a sheen that almost gleams despite the scuffs. The cloth he uses is dark with polish, its cleaner edges long gone. He'll fold it over and over to find fresh spots until the job is done. The hour is late now, and the streets have thinned to only a few stragglers. Behind closed doors, basins are emptied into gutters. Steps are given a last quick sweep, and boots are set by firesides to dry. Linen hangs in kitchens to finish drying overnight, and pots are set ready for the morning's boiling water. The city, for all its grime, is tucking itself in, ready to begin again at first light, when the pumps will squeak, the kettles will sing, and the day's endless balancing act between dirt and order will begin anew. The stillness at this hour is a fragile thing. Even the faintest sounds seem to hang in the damp air, an iron gate clicking shut somewhere far off, the dull thud of a cartwheel rolling over an uneven stone, the scuff of boots as someone hurries home. You keep to the lamplight, where you can step in carefully on cobbles slick with fog. You pass a chemist's shop, its window dark, but its painted lettering still legible in the glow of the nearest lamp. Behind the glass, you can just make out rows of bottles, their shapes lined like silent sentries, green and amber glass, holding liquids in shades from honey gold to deep garnet. Labels promise all manner of cures and preventatives, tonics for the blood lozenges, for the breath soaps that claim to banish all odor. Some of these will mask a smell. A few might genuinely kill the cause. But here, confidence in a label often matters more than what's inside. Next door, a small ironmonger's shop displays a line of enamel basins in its window. One in particular catches your eye, deep oval-shaped, the kind that could double for a laundry tub or a makeshift bath for a child. Its white surface is clean, but chipped along the rim, the iron beneath showing through in dull gray arcs. You imagine it filled with hot water from a kettle, steam curling upward into a kitchen, lit only by the orange glow of the range. A watchman stands at the corner, his lantern casting a trembling circle of light on the stones. His cloak hangs heavy with damp, the hem dark from puddles. He tips his head in a quiet greeting as you pass. His task tonight is to keep order, not to worry about the smudges of soot streaking his gloves or the faint sour tang of wool that has been worn too many days in a row. The street leads you toward the edge of the market district. By day, it would be deafening, but now it lies mostly in shadow. A few stalls still glow in the lamplight, late-night vendors selling rolls tea or roasted chestnuts. One baker packs his remaining loaves into a cloth sack, the flour from his apron blooming in the air as he moves. The counter beneath his hands bears the shine of long use, scrubbed each day, but never truly scoured. In a sheltered corner, a brazier glows red beneath a mesh of roasting chestnuts. The vendor turns them slowly with a gloved hand, the shells splitting to reveal pale, sweet-smelling flesh. He serves them in paper cones made from yesterday's newsprint, the ink smudging your fingers. Around him, customers warm their palms over the brazier, the heat pulling them in like moths to a flame. A few streets over, you spot a cobbler bent over a boot in the yellow wash of his workshop lamp. His bench is littered with scraps of leather awls and spools of waxed thread. A tin of polish stands open beside him, its sharp, tarry scent filling the air. His hands are stained black at the fingertips. His apron is stiff where the polish has dried into it. The floor is swept of trimmings each night, but the marks of the trade are too deep to scrub away entirely. Farther along, you pass a row of boarding houses. Through the open door of one, you glimpse a narrow hallway lined with boots and coats. The smell inside is unmistakable: coal dust, damp wool, the faint musk of too many bodies in too little space. Upstairs, beds are crowded into small rooms, sometimes just a mattress on the floor. One washroom serves the whole house, and hot water is a rarity. A nightly wash might mean nothing more than a cold splash from a basin and a quick rub with a towel before bed. A man emerges from one doorway carrying a dented pail. He tips its contents into the gutter-gray water that runs off toward the nearest drain, then sets the pail upside down to dry. He wipes his hands on his trousers before disappearing back inside. It's a small domestic scene repeated across the city at this hour. The street bends toward the river again, and the air grows sharper with its scent. The fog has settled thicker here, curling low over the cobbles, so your boots vanish briefly with each step. Somewhere nearby, a horse stamps in its stall. The sound of shifting tack carries faintly in the stillness. You find yourself beside a public trough, its stone edges slick and dark. A horse lowers its head to drink the water sloshing quietly in the shallow basin. Beside it, a man kneels to fill a can, scooping the water with a dented tin mug. He drinks deeply, wipes his mouth on his sleeve, and walks on without a glance. In this world, shared water is not a curiosity, it is an ordinary fact of life. Leaving the trough behind, you cut through a narrow passage toward the quieter residential streets. Lamps here are fewer, their light falling in long gaps between buildings. You catch the faint smell of bread cooling on a windowsill, its warmth struggling against the damp. Somewhere overhead, laundry shifts faintly on a line, the cloth stiff with cold. In one window, a woman stands, brushing her hair before bed. The lamplight catches the arc of each stroke, glinting off the long strands. On a table nearby, a basin waits with a folded towel beside it. Soon the lamp will be turned down. The basin emptied into the street, and the house darkened for the night. You walk on your breath curling in pale ribbons before you. The city is mostly quiet now, but its undercurrent hums on water trickling toward drains, the hiss of gas in the lamps, the faint creak of rope from the river. Behind walls and curtains, the rituals of cleanliness have paused until morning. Outside, the streets hold the day's residue in their gutters and stones, waiting for another round of sweeping, scrubbing, and scouring that will never quite win. And as you head deeper into the lamp-lit dark, you realize that in Victorian London, cleanliness is never finished. It is always a work in progress, stitched into the city's breathing, its waking, and even its sleep. The street you're following turns slightly, its cobbles slick underfoot, where thin streams of water have escaped from nearby gutters. The fog blurs the far end into a soft smear of gold and gray, and the nearest lamp hums faintly in the damp air. From behind shuttered windows comes the muted clink of dishes being stacked away, the scrape of a chair leg on wood, the faint clatter of a poker in a grate. At one doorway, a maid kneels on the step, scrubbing at the stone with a stiff, bristled brush. The soapy water she's using is already a dull gray swirling around the bristles before spilling into the street. Her apron is damp to the knees, her fingers pink from the cold. She'll tip the bucket into the gutter when she's done leaving the step, a shade lighter than the rest of the street, at least until the first boot treads across it tomorrow. You pass a small news vendor gathering up the last of his unsold papers. The ink has rubbed faint shadows onto his fingertips, which he wipes absently on his trousers. The papers are stacked into a neat pile tied with twine and slung under his arm. The air around him still carries the faint smell of wet newsprint, a sharpness that mingles with the coal smoke curling down from nearby chimneys. Ahead, the rattle of a handcart grows louder until its owner comes into view, a rag picker, his cart piled high with the day's gleanings, battered tin pans, splintered chairs, scraps of fabric too worn for clothing. He moves slowly, his boots scuffing the stones, eyes scanning the ground even now for anything of worth. The smell that follows him is a jumble of damp wood dust and the faint sourness of old cloth. The houses on this stretch are taller, their facades worn but still holding on to a certain dignity. In some windows, lamplight spills over drawn curtains. In others, only the faintest glow hints at life inside. Behind one, a woman bends over a washstand, wringing out a cloth. She swipes it across the sill before shaking it briskly into the street. The mist swallows the tiny droplets before they reach the ground. From an open basement door comes the sharp scent of soap and boiled cabbage. A scullery maid stands in the doorway for a breath of cool air, wiping her hands on a damp apron. Inside, you glimpse a stone floor slick from mopping a bucket, brimming with cloudy water beside it. Somewhere deeper in the house, you hear the muffled clank of pots being stacked for the night. You turn onto a narrower street where the windows are closer together and the steps more worn. A few children linger outside, playing a last quiet game of marbles in the glow of a single lamp. Their boots are scuffed at their coats, a patchwork of repairs, and the knees of their trousers are shiny with use. One boy rubs a dirty sleeve across his nose before taking his turn, and nobody notices or minds. Soap is saved for washing, not for every small mess. From an upstairs window comes the repetitive thud of a rug being beaten. Each strike releases a little puff of dust into the night air, which glitters briefly before dissolving into the fog. The person beating it coughs once muffled by the cloth tied around their mouth, then resumes. The work will leave the rug a bit cleaner, but in this city, the air itself delivers fresh soot daily. The smell of damp laundry grows stronger as you pass a row of lines strung between buildings. Shirts, underskirts, stockings, they all hang limp in the chill, the hems stiff where they've brushed against stone. Drops fall steadily onto the stones below, joining the narrow runnels, already threading their way to the gutter. You pause outside a shop with a wide, low window filled with crockery. Behind the glass plates and mugs are stacked neatly, their surfaces catching the lamplight. The shop is closed, but you can see the fine layer of dust that has settled despite the daily wiping. In a city where coal smoke is a constant dusting, is as much a ritual as sweeping the step. At the next corner, a cooper's yard smells faintly of sawdust and resin. Barrels are stacked in neat pyramids, their iron hoops catching glints from the lamp. A man in a thick leather apron stands in the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. His work is done for the day, but the smell of fresh-cut wood will cling to him until morning. Farther along, you pass a horse trough, its water dark and still. A cat drinks from the edge, its tail twitching as it watches you. The stone around the trough is slick from spills, and the faint smell of hay drifts from a nearby stable door. Inside, a groom moves slowly down the row of stalls, pitchfork in hand, turning the straw for the night. The horses shift and snort their breath, fogging in the lantern light. You take a turning that leads you toward a busier road. A coffee stall is doing brisk business with a knot of cab drivers. Their voices are low, their coats pulled tight against the cold. The stall holder dips a ladle into a steaming urn, filling thick mugs that are wiped between uses with a well-worn cloth. The smell of coffee, strong and slightly burnt, cuts through the heavier scents of the street. Past the stall, a watchman makes his round, pausing to check a locked shop door before moving on. His boots strike a steady rhythm on the cobbles, echoing faintly in the still air. He disappears into the fog, his lantern bobbing like a will-o'-the-wisp until the mist swallows it entirely. By now, the city's pace has slowed to its lowest hum. Behind curtains and shutters, the final small acts of the day play out: basins, emptied cloths, hung to dry fires banked low in the grate. Steps have been scrubbed for the morning boots, polished where they sit by the hearth. And in the streets, the dirt of the day lies quiet, waiting for the next round of sweeping, scrubbing, and scouring. In Victorian London, cleanliness is never the absence of dirt. It is the daily decision to hold it at bay, one bucket, one brush, one cloth at a time. The fog hangs heavier now, pressing against the street lamps, until their light feels warmer but weaker, a golden haze hovering low to the ground. You walk past a row of houses where the curtains are drawn tight, but the faint glow behind them hints at quiet scenes. Supper dishes cleared away, lamps turned low, the rustle of newspapers, the low murmur of voices. In one doorway, a man crouches over a pair of boots. His hands move steadily, the cloth in his grip black with polish, the smell of waxy leather drifting into the cool air. The boots shine in the lamplight, though the scuffs and creases of daily wear will never vanish completely. When he's done, he sets them neatly by the door, ready for the morning's work. This nightly polishing is less about vanity than about preservation, keeping the leather supple against damp and mud. A little further along, you pass a yard behind a row of shops. Its gates are open just enough for you to glimpse the dark shapes of barrels and crates stacked in haphazard towers. A man is tipping the day's wastewater from a mop bucket onto the cobbles, where it runs off toward the gutter in a slow, silvery trail. The air smells faintly of stale beer and damp wood, the scents of the tavern that fronts the property. Around the next bend, a seamstress works late by the light of a single oil lamp. She sits close to the window, her needle flashing in and out of dark fabric. A small tin basin rests on the floor beside her, water still in it from rinsing the cloth. Threads and pins scatter the table, and a pot of tea cools slowly nearby. The faint scent of lavender sachets drifts from a pile of finished garments stacked neatly on a chair. In the shadow of a taller building, you find a pump. Its iron is slick with condensation, its handle polished bright from years of use. Tonight it stands silent, but you can picture the morning queue, women in aprons, children clutching small jugs, the creak of the handle, and the splash of water into waiting buckets. Each home will carry its share indoors, careful not to spill a drop. You take a turning into a narrower lane where laundry still hangs overhead. Shirts and sheets sway gently in the breeze, dripping into puddles on the stones below. A faint scent of soap lingers in the air, clean but edged with the coal smoke that seeps into everything. The damp fabric will be brought in before frost can stiffen it, but tonight it will drink the chill. Farther along, you come upon a chandler's shop where the shutters are only half closed. Inside, rows of candles stand in wooden trays, their smooth sides catching the lamplight. The air is thick with the scent of tallow, warm and slightly sweet. The shopkeeper is tidying the counter, sweeping away stray wick trimmings and gathering the last coins of the day into a small tin box. The worktop gleams faintly, where years of rubbing have smoothed the wood. At the far end of the street, a public house still hums. Its door swings open to release a burst of heat voices and the tang of beer. Inside, tankards are rinsed in the same basin again and again, the water clouding as the evening goes on. The floorboards are sticky underfoot. Sawdust has been scattered in the worst spots to soak up spills. Outside, a man leans against the wall, drawing on a clay pipe. The smoke curls upward, disappearing into the mist. Turning a corner, you find a stable. The big doors are propped open, and inside a groom is brushing down a mare. The sound of the brush against the horse's coat is soft but steady, releasing a warm, musky scent. Fresh straw lies in the stalls, its pale gold bright against the darker bedding. The groom's boots are dusted with chaff, and his hands are ingrained with the faint smell of horse and saddle soap. You wander on and catch the faint notes of a street organ somewhere ahead. The tune is slow and lilting, drifting through the mist like a memory. When you reach the corner, the organ grinder is packing up, folding his instrument into a worn case. A small crowd of children disperses, their laughter fading quickly into the night. The street narrows again into an alley where the glow of a single lamp falls across a stack of firewood. The scent of freshly split wood is strong here, a rare sharpness in the city's smoky air. A man emerges from a side door to stack a few more logs against the wall. His sleeves are rolled to the elbow, his forearms dusted white from chopping. The wood will feed the morning's fire, heat water for washing, and boil kettles for tea. You step out into a wider square where the centerpiece is a tall public fountain. Water spills from its spout into a stone basin, the sound steady and low. A tin cup hangs from a chain. It swings slightly in the night air. The stone rim is worn smooth where countless hands have rested. Though the fountain's water is far from pure, it is still a gathering point, a place for refreshment, gossip, and the quiet exchange of coins for favors. On the square's far side, a window glows softly behind lace curtains. A woman is bent over a wash tub, her arms deep in sudsy water. Steam fogs the glass as she works, and every few moments she lifts a shirt or sheet to wring it out, sending a small shower of droplets to the floor. Laundry, like everything else here, is never finished. There is always another pile waiting, another kettle to be boiled. The fog curls closer now, dimming the edges of the buildings, muffling the stones underfoot. You follow the faint light of another lamp, and think of the quiet repetitions happening behind all these walls. Brushes against boots, cloths against tables, soap against skin. None of it will last past morning, but it's done anyway out of habit, pride, or simply the need to keep some line drawn against the dirt. And as you walk deeper into the night, you feel that line beneath your feet, the one Victorian Londoners trace over and over, day after day, to keep the city just this side of being swallowed whole by its own grime. The square falls away behind you as you step into a narrow street, its cobbles glistening under the soft haze of the lamps. The fog curls in from both ends, making each patch of light feel like a small harbor in an endless gray sea. Your footsteps echo softly, then vanish into the mist, as though the city is swallowing the sound whole. At a doorway, a charwoman tips the contents of a pail into the gutter, cloudy water, flecked with soap bubble. It snakes away between the stones, carrying with it the day's last traces of scrubbing. She leans the pail against the wall to drain, rubs her hands on her apron, and steps inside without a backward glance. For her, it is just one of hundreds of small chores that keep the rooms inside barely ahead of the dirt outside. A faint orange glow spills from the half-open shutters of a bootmaker's workshop. Inside, the craftsman is bent low over a worn pair of lace-up boots, his awl punching neat holes along the seam. The air smells of leather and lamp oil, and the bench is scattered with scraps, nails, and thick spools of thread. His apron hangs heavy with dried polish, its dark sheen showing in the lamplight. A battered kettle sits near the fire for softening leather. The water inside will be tipped out into the street before he locks up. You follow the curve of the street until it narrows to a small court. Here, a single pump stands silent under the lamp's watch. Its iron glistens with beads of moisture, the handle worn smooth where countless palms have pressed over the years. In the morning, the court will be alive with clanging pails, chatter, and the squeak of the handle, but now it waits in the quiet, a sentinel over the cobbles. From one of the upper windows, a faint sound drifts down the rhythmic thump of a rug being beaten. Each strike sends a little cloud into the cold night air, dust specks catching briefly in the lamplight, before fading into the fog. The work is relentless. Tomorrow, the rug will be heavy with soot again, but for now it will feel cleaner underfoot. A side passage opens onto a row of workshops. In one, a cooper rolls the rim of a barrel along his bench, the iron band clinking softly as he works it into place. The smell of fresh-cut wood and resin is almost clean enough to make you forget the city outside. Next door, a tinsmith sits surrounded by the ring of his own trade, bright sheets of metal propped against the wall, a scattering of shavings underfoot. His hands are blackened with soot and oil, but his workbench gleams from daily wiping. Back on the street, you pass a costermonger packing up the last of his goods. His cart is half empty now, the bruised apples and soft pears left for those willing to buy cheap. He tips the day's sweepings, a mix of wilted leaves, paper scraps, and straw into the gutter with the toe of his boot, then throws a canvas over the cart. The smell of overripe fruit lingers in the air as he wheels it into the shadows. Farther along, a faint strain of music reaches you, an accordion played slowly. You follow it to find a man leaning against a doorway, his case open at his feet. The tune is low and steady, weaving through the mist like a thread. A few coins glint in the case. The musician's coat is shiny at the elbows, his boots patched but polished. He nods as you pass the music, following you down the lane. The lamps grow sparser here, the darkness thicker. In one doorway, a mother kneels to wash her child's face in a small basin. The child fidgets, but the mother's hand is steady. When she's done, she wrings out the cloth and hangs it over the basin's edge. Tomorrow the cloth will be rinsed, perhaps boiled if there's enough fuel for the kettle. Tonight it will dry in the faint warmth of the fire. You pass a rag and bone man pushing his cart, the wooden wheels squealing softly. His load is a jumble of broken chairs, dented pans, bundles of old rags. The cart smells faintly of mildew and damp rope. He works silently, scanning the shadows for anything worth adding to his haul. Behind him the street falls quiet again, as if holding its breath. Near the next corner, a coffee stall glows under its canvas roof. The stall holder's hands are wrapped around a mug for warmth between servings, and his brazier glows a deep red. The mugs for customers are chipped, but clean enough by the day's measure wiped between uses with a worn rag. Steam curls up into the fog, carrying with it the bittersweet smell of strong brew. Across from the stall, a public house spills light and warmth into the street. The smell of beer smoke and roasting meat cuts through the cold. Inside, tankards are rinsed in the same basin over and over, and the sawdust on the floor carries the dampness of many nights' worth of spills. Yet in this glow, the grime feels less hostile, softened by the hum of conversation and the crackle of the fire. The road bends again toward the river, and the air sharpens with its scent. You hear the steady lap of water against stone, the creak of a moored barge. The fog hides the far bank entirely, leaving only the nearest lamps to mark the edge of the world. Somewhere upstream, a bell tolls slow, deliberate echoing across the water. You turn away from the embankment into another narrow street. Behind these closed doors, the nightly tasks are nearly done. Boots polished and set by the fire basins, emptied hearths swept. Clothes hang from lines strung across kitchens, drying in the last of the stove's warmth. The city is settling itself for the night, every household drawing its own small boundary between order and the ever-present tide of dirt. And you walk on through the mist, the lamps flickering behind you, the quiet of late-night London wrapping itself close around your shoulders. The lamps thin out as you turn into a quieter stretch of road. Here the fog seems to thicken, pooling low along the gutters, so that the cobbles vanish into a dim silver haze. The silence is deeper, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a windowsill, or the soft rustle of cloth as laundry sways faintly overhead. You pull your coat a little closer, the damp finding its way through the fabric to the skin beneath. At one doorway, a maid is on her knees with a bucket and rag, giving the front step a brisk final scrub before bed. Her sleeves are rolled high, her skirts pinned back, the water turning gray as she works it over the stone. She tips the bucket into the gutter and wipes her hands on her apron before disappearing inside. Tomorrow morning she'll be back out again, because the soot, the boots, and the weather will undo her work before the day is an hour old. You pass a narrow shop with a sign for an herbalist. Its windows are dark, but a faint perfume lingers in the air, outside dried lavender mint, a whisper of camphor. Bundles of herbs hang in the back room, ready to be sold as sachets for drawers or boiled into tisanes. Some swear by them to keep illness away. Others simply like the smell, a clean note against the city's heavier odors. A little farther along, the faint glow of an oil lamp marks a cobbler still at work. He sits hunched over his bench, a boot cradled in his lap needle, and waxed thread flashing in the lamplight. Scraps of leather litter the floor, their edges curling where they've dried. His apron is stained dark with polish, his fingers nicked and blackened from years of handling tack and tacks alike. On the table sits a chipped mug of tea gone cold hours ago. Turning into a narrower lane, you notice the sound of dripping water echoing faintly between the walls. A pump stands at its center, the spout leaking a slow, steady trickle into the trough below. The surface shivers with each drop, catching glints from the nearest lamp. A tin cup hangs from a chain, rocking slightly in the damp breeze. In the daytime, this would be the hub of the lane bustle, chatter, clanging pails, but now it is just another sentinel in the fog. From one open upper window, you hear the rhythmic thud of a rug being beaten. The worker pauses every few strokes to cough into the sleeve of their shirt, the dust too thick to ignore. Each impact sends a faint plume spiraling into the night air before it settles again over the street. A door opens just ahead, and a man steps out carrying a sloshing pail. He throws its contents into the gutter, the water running dark between the cobbles. The smell that follows is sharp sour and instantly swallowed by the cold night air. He sets the pail upside down on the step and retreats inside without a word. Past him, a pair of boys huddle near the corner, one holding a battered shoe while the other works at it with a brush. Their bootblacks catching a last bit of business before the streets empty for good. The brush flashes in the lamplight, the leather gleaming despite the scuffs. The rag they use is worn to threads, but they fold it over and over to find a cleaner patch. You pass a coffee stall doing a quiet trade with night watchmen and drivers. The stallholder wipes mugs with a damp cloth before filling them from the steaming urn. The smell of strong brew cuts through the damp and coal smoke. A brazier glows at their feet, throwing a pocket of warmth into the cold. Crossing to the other side, you find a public house with its door propped open. Laughter and the clink of mugs spill into the street. Inside the bar is busy with late drinkers. The sawdust on the floor is trodden flat and darkened from a night's worth of spills. Tankards are rinsed in the same basin repeatedly, the water now an opaque brown. Yet the warmth and camaraderie make the grime seem distant, almost irrelevant. Farther down the road bends toward the river. The fog grows denser here, carrying the tang of brine and the faint, sour note of refuse. A lighter man tends to his moorings, pulling ropes tight with a grunt, the lantern on his deck swinging gently. His coat glistens with moisture, his boots dark to the ankle. The wood of the wharf beneath your feet is slick, the boards smelling faintly of tar and wet rope. You leave the river behind, climbing a short slope to a row of terraced houses. Most are shuttered now, but in one kitchen window, you glimpse a woman pouring water from a kettle into a basin. She leans over it to wash her face, then dips a cloth to wipe the table clean. A neat line of boots stands drying near the hearth, polished for the morning. Above washing lines stretch between windows, shirts and underthings limp in the damp night air. Drops fall occasionally, striking the stones with tiny clicks. The coal smoke scent is thicker here, wrapping the houses in its familiar blanket. At the top of the slope, the road narrows again. You walk past a row of workshops locked tight for the night. Behind one shutter, the faint glow of embers reveals the outline of a blacksmith's forge banked low but still alive. The smell of hot metal and ash lingers, seeping into the wood of the doors. By now, the streets are nearly empty. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls the hour. Behind closed doors, final tasks are being done, fires banked, ashes swept, basins emptied into gutters. The city is settling under its quilt of fog and coal smoke, the night pressing close around its edges. And as you walk on, you feel the rhythm of it, the endless loop of cleaning and soiling, scrubbing, and surrendering, the quiet pride in each small corner held against the city's tide of dirt. Tomorrow it will all begin again. The fog is thicker now, drawn close around the streets like a heavy curtain. Each gas lamp you pass seems to float in its own little world, the air between one pool of light and the next so dim you could imagine stepping into a different city altogether. Your breath blooms pale in front of you, dissolving quickly into the chill. You move down a narrow street where the cobbles are slick from the night's damp. Here the buildings press in tightly, their upper stories almost touching. Curtains are drawn in nearly every window, but the faint glow of lamplight behind them hints at life continuing in small, familiar patterns. Somewhere a kettle whistles softly. Somewhere else a latch clicks as someone locks a door for the night. At one doorway, a man crouches over a tin bath set just inside his home. He pours in a final kettle of hot water, steam curling up and drifting out into the cold. His shirt sleeves are rolled to the elbow, his arms reddened from the heat. He steps in with a quiet sigh, sponge in hand, working quickly before the water loses its warmth. Tomorrow, the same tin bath will be stacked away until the next evening's turn. Farther along, you pass a small shop where the shutters are half closed. Inside, a grocer sweeps the floor, the broom's bristles scratching softly against the boards. He works the day's crumbs and dust into a neat pile, then tips it into the gutter outside. It's a modest defense against the city's filth, but a defense all the same. In a nearby alley, a woman beats a rug draped over a line. Each thump sends a muffled cloud into the air, briefly visible in the lamplight. Her arms move in steady arcs, her breath puffing between blows. Tomorrow, soot will settle back onto the fibers, but for tonight, it will feel a little fresher underfoot. You turn a corner and come upon a coffee stall, still doing quiet business. A few cab drivers stand near the brazier hands wrapped around steaming mugs. The stall holder wipes each mug before filling it again, dipping the rag into a bucket of water gone cloudy hours ago. The rich scent of coffee cuts through the damp, warming your senses, even if the drink never passes your lips. Past the stall, the street widens briefly before narrowing again into a row of lodging houses. At one, the door is ajar, just enough to glimpse a hallway lined with boots. A girl kneels to polish them, her rag black with polish, the sheen of the leather catching the light as she works. She sets each finished pair neatly by the wall, ready for the morning. You follow the street toward the river, the air sharpening with its cold, briny breath. A horse trough stands at the corner, its stone rim slick with moisture. A man bends to scoop water into a tin can, drinking without pause. For him, there is nothing unusual in sharing the horse's source. The city's water comes from everywhere and nowhere, and the line between clean and dirty is always shifting. Down at the embankment, barges rock gently against their moorings, their ropes creaking in the night air. Lanterns sway with the tide, casting shifting pools of light across the slick boards of the quay. Somewhere nearby, a lighterman hums softly as he checks his cargo, his boots leaving damp prints on the wood. The smell here is a mixture of salt, silt, and the faint rot of the river's offerings. Climbing back toward the higher streets, you pass a row of shops closed tight for the night. The glass of their windows reflects the gaslight in fractured, watery shapes. Behind one, a baker stacks pans the day's last loaves cooling on the counter. Behind another, a tailor hangs finished garments on a rack, brushing each lightly before drawing the curtains closed. At the next corner, a lamplighter makes his final check, pausing to adjust the flame in one sputtering lamp. The hiss of the gas is soft against the night, the glow steadying as he lowers the glass. He moves on without hurry, his ladder balanced on one shoulder, disappearing into the mist like a shadow. In the distance, a church bell chimes, the sound muffled by fog. The streets have emptied almost entirely now. Behind closed doors, boots rest by the fire basins, stand emptied and drying, and linens hang in kitchens to drink the last of the stove's warmth. Every household has fought its daily skirmish with dirt and damp, and for tonight, at least the worst has been pushed back. You walk on your own footsteps, soft in the sleeping city, feeling how deeply this rhythm runs. In Victorian London, cleanliness is never final. It is a thing remade daily, endlessly undone and remade again, one polished boot, one scrubbed step, one washed face at a time. The fog hides the dirt for now, but morning will lay it bare, and the work will begin all over again. The streets grow softer in your mind, now their cobbles fading into the quiet haze of night. The gas lamps are little more than pale halos in the fog, their hiss and glow becoming a memory rather than a presence. Somewhere the last cart of the evening rolls away into the dark, its sound dwindling until you can't tell if it's real or only imagined. You've walked these streets long enough to know their nightly rhythm, the steps scrubbed clean for morning, the boots lined neatly by the hearth, the basins emptied into gutters that carry the day's dust away. Every doorway you've passed has its own small victories, tidy thresholds, brushed coats, the faint scent of soap lingering in a basin. The city's sounds are softer now. A far-off bell, a single set of footsteps, the whisper of fabric on fabric, as laundry shifts gently on a night breeze. Even the river moves without hurry, carrying away the day's offerings in its slow, patient tide. Here, the struggle for cleanliness is not about chasing perfection. It's about keeping the tide of dirt just far enough at bay so that life can go on. Every swept floor, every rinsed mug, every polished boot-out is part of that quiet defiance. And though the grime will return, settling in overnight, drifting back in with the morning mist, there's comfort in knowing the battle will be met again tomorrow. You can let your shoulders drop now. The fog has wrapped the city in stillness, softening its edges, until even its imperfections feel harmless. The night is long enough for rest. Close your eyes. Let the faint hiss of gas lamps and the slow breath of the Thames guide you into quiet. Victorian London will wait until morning.